appreciate being invited into this space. I adored and really pay attention to Project Ujima from a distance. I appreciate all the work that y'all are doing in the world, what you're doing in DC. You all are teaching us so much about what is possible and what is happening today. And I deeply appreciate that. Ray is often brought up as the master singer that I brought singing back to DC because he inspired me so much. So we now are singers at DC. I mean, at Sista Fire because of Ray's beautiful voice. I'd love to get started. I'm going to share my screen, y'all. And I'm going to share a quote that I'd like to help us kind of ground the moment with. Give me 1 second. So I'd love if we could just take a moment, and I would love for someone to read out loud this quote that we have from Bell Hooks. Could someone read for me?
To be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside the main body. Living as we did on the edge, we developed a particular way of seeing the reality. We looked both from the outside in and from the inside out. We focused our attention on the center as well as on the margin.
So I'd just like to take a moment, just ask people to sit with that, read it again, and if you need to, but just take in what Belle was sharing with us. So I'd love to just take a moment and have folks say your name and your pronoun. And one thing that comes up for you in this process, one thing that comes up for you in this reflection, we're not going to go into full storytelling. So to remember, I don't know how many people we have collectively with us yet today, but here we go. So can we get a few folks to reflect for us? And then we'll have other folks just share their names. I can't see hands because not everyone is showing themselves.
I can start.
Thank you.
So my name's Olivia, use she, they pronouns. And the quote made me think of like the double consciousness kind of concept. And then also kind of like the concept of like intersectionality and like experiences of like Black women particularly.
Thank you. Somebody else like to go? Other folks could also drop in the chat. If you don't want to say out loud, you could drop it in the chat, put your name and pronoun. Do we have folks in the room that would like to share?
I can go if while others think about some answers. I think for me, it sort of, it made me think of the ability to just look at society as a whole, sort of without or uh, sort of beyond, your own narrow experience of things and your own experience of living in society, sort of look at society as a whole and other people's experiences as well. That's something that
Mhm.
came up, yeah.
So what do folks think she means by being in the margin? What what does that say to us?
I think for me, it's saying people who like societally like just have a harder time, less access to power, less access to resources just by the identities that they have. And I will say that the quote was making me think about how people who live like more in the margin have to be super like aware of themselves, but for safety and for just like community also has to be super aware of like what everything else is, what all of the other things that's happening in ways that people who don't live as much in the margins don't have to be aware of. They don't always have to be.
Yep, thank you. Other folks? All right, I'm gonna also put this quote, this statement in the chat that people who are on Zoom could answer it in the chat. So I'm gonna say a little and then I'd love to, for people at least to ground us with who you are. So this quote is really trying to help us understand. Oftentimes people talk about us as folks of color, queer folks, folks with disabilities, that we're on margins of society and that we don't see or we're not centered in the thing. But in reality, what Bell tells us is that we have the capacity to not only see what is happening from our experience of the quote unquote margin, but we get to see from the inside, from the outside. Because people often invisibilize us, and we get to have this level of observation that other people don't. And so we have the capacity to see from more than one angle, and the importance of that, the depth of that is critical, right? And our knowledge and information and what we understand and experience becomes really important. And so I share that quote because for me, it's a way to understand the importance of our role when we talk about research, right? When we talk about community research and the importance of that. So can we have folks just take a minute and just say their names and pronouns?
Sure, I'll go. Thank you so much for holding the space with us. My name is Bashizo, and I use these, their, and they, them pronouns.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Arifa. I'm the note taker at Ujima, and I use she and they pronouns.
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
pass it to Susan.
Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Susan Berry, and I use she, her pronouns, and I will pass it to Christian.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christian. I use they, them pronouns. And I forgot what the rest of what I was supposed to say is contextualizing us. In my response to the bell hooks quote, I was specifically thinking about how even individuals that are forced into the margins, they are still a part of the system. And that was emphasized for me by reading that from her.
Mm-hmm. Justice, do you want to go?
Yes, sorry about that. I'm Justice. I use ze, them, or she, her pronouns. I'm political education coordinator at Sista Fire and excited to be with y'all. I was talking to a community member on the phone, so I had to jump off when I was probably called. And for me, what the bell hooks quote speaks to is one, um, we can't just have our eye where we're told to. We have to be paying attention to not only the center, but our centers. We have to recognize our centers, and we also have to recognize the folks who aren't in the room who need to be. Um, and there's a lot of different ways I interpret that quote, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
I'll hop in. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray, and I use the they series pronouns, and I work at Ujima as the Director of Coalitions, Policy, and Grassroots Organizing. I'm just saying hi. And opening it to folks in the room if they want to introduce themselves.
Yes.
Oh wait, I'll turn the blur off so people can actually see me. Okay.
Hi, I'm Aisha. I use she, ella pronoun. I missed the introduction with the quote, so I apologize for that, but excited to hear the rest of the presentation. So thank you.
And you don't have to, if you want to, you can obviously show your face, but also it's picking up your voice from there.
Okay, no, I don't mind showing my face. Hi everyone, my name is Bolu. I use she, her pronouns. Just arrived in Boston like a few weeks ago from the UK. But so I was really keen to come learn about Ujima, and I love that. Although I missed the part of it, I love the bell hooks is being mentioned, so I think I'm in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Hello, my name is Annika. I use she, her pronouns. I love the quote, and it made me just think about the multi-directionality of seeing, and that was really compelling.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, last one in the space, Genoa Daly. I work with Ujima, he, him.
Thank you, Genoa. All right. I also had put a quote, not a quote, a statement in the thing. I just like to read a couple of people said some Nisha said, for me, it speaks to the birth of the surviving versus the thriving narrative. When you are in the margin, you tend to learn to survive before you learn to thrive, causing us to learn the world as a whole because we have to navigate the full scope of the world and find our space in it. All right, that's quite profound. Thank you. Like, I love the knowledge in the room. Y'all be real. I appreciate you. The other thing I dropped in the chat, just for you to think, right? Like, research is blank when our community leads. Research is blank when our community leads. Let me get some popcorn words. What's the word that comes to your research blank when our community leads? More grounded, speaks. All right. I think for other folks, any other thoughts? All right. It is important for us to always be in relationship to understanding our connection to it. Reflective, nuanced, yes, yes. Because if we have an understanding of more accurate, hell yeah, understanding of how we bring it to our research, our knowledge. The next place I'm going to go is just to my slides so we can begin. So what is community participatory action research? For Sista Fire, community participatory action research puts impact people in the driver's seat to ask the questions, to collect and analyze data, and move to collective action. It blends our organizing, our research, and our political education, right? For us, those are all the key elements for how we move our work in the context of the research, and how do we get to make sure our folks are at the center of what we do. What we tried to do first is to really work on identifying issues directly impacting our constituency base, building and exercising power with that, and then grounding our collective experience. And for us, when this first happened, we used participatory action research from the very beginning of our work. And our early work in Rhode Island, we had gotten a message from a member asking us if we were paying attention to something that was happening on social media. We didn't really know what they were talking about. They pointed us into a direction, and a young Black woman named LaShonda Hazard was tracking her experience online at a local hospital. And as we tracked that information over I think it was a 3-day period, what ended up happening is LaShonda passed away, and so did her child from the hospital. She was sent home, and then she was on social media saying that she felt like something was happening, like she was dying or something was wrong with her baby. And then the next thing we knew was that she lost her life. From that moment, we started having a whole dialogue around what are we going to do about this? What does this mean? And we just started, the number of stories that started to come in from just our membership experiencing and sharing with us their own birth stories and what was happening with them. And from that moment, we started to try to make some decisions about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. In our first phase, we had to really think about what are the questions that we need to ask ourselves to really figure out what's going on. And we pulled our members together and we began to ask questions like about what was going on, what do we know, what do we need to know, what's the real story. And the thing that we first landed on was understanding that the story was bigger than just one person. And we needed to understand LaShonda's story, but we also needed to understand the larger story of our community and their experience. Sista Fire was engaged and in partnership with doulas. And so we started to also ask doulas what was going on with them. So for us, when you think about research, the power of your questions become really critical. What kind of methods are you going to use? The first part of our process, we really knew we wanted to collect birth stories. And that's what we did. We started collecting birth stories in our community, and we used different methodologies to collect stories, from one-on-ones to collective storytelling. But when you do that, you also have to think about care. For us, it was like preparing our members for what it meant to hear a story from someone that in a story that for many folks could be really painful and traumatizing. So really learning to understand how to collect a story, how to listen to a story, to deal with firsthand trauma, and making sure whatever way we were doing our work was trauma informed. And thinking about that. So thinking about the person we were caring for and the environment that we created, but also working with our members to make sure that they were caring for them, that we were caring for them after hearing so many stories. We also, it's about once you collect the stories, what is the work that we have to do to start to analyze, right? So what does that mean around how we track the themes that are coming out? What are the narratives that are starting to emerge? And how do we really start to organize that data? We did a lot of background research also to learn about what else was happening in the country around women of color and birth. What was happening with maternal health? What is our analysis around reproductive justice? All of these things helped inform how we saw and understand the data. One of our key things is we really only looked at other learning and information that was coming from other people of color. We were not trying to introduce an analysis or understanding of this work with anyone from anyone else but other folks of color, because oftentimes the stories were told or the data was framed in a way that really didn't add to value to us. In our team really building their analysis around what we saw and we found, we took that data once we had it and we shared it back with the community. We shared the results of it because at the end of the day, no matter what data we collect, it belongs to our community. And so we collected over 50 stories. We surveyed people around their experience, and we surveyed over 300 people. So we were cleaning and analyzing data from both storytelling and surveys. And we took that and we had a huge community gathering to have our community come back and look at what we did. So every person that shared their story was invited into the process with us. And we really made sure that they could comment, they could add something new. If there was something that they feel like we didn't get right, they gave us feedback. We also always shared with people, you don't ever have to share your name. You don't have to be in the front of the room if you don't want to. We really tried to think about what it meant for folks. But as we began to really do that, it helped us begin to see and understand what we were going to be demanding and what we felt the solutions, because we were analyzing the data, but we were also starting to talk about what do we think the solutions are to this process? And how do we really take time to reflect on that? What came out overall from our story collection process was our ability to see 4 key areas of our learning was around translation and interpretation, the impact of what so many people talked about was doctor speaks. Like they would talk to them and people would just say, we never knew what they were talking about, even though they were talking about my body, they were talking to me about my experience and the challenges of what that meant, even for the people who spoke English. And then for folks there, the hospital's infrastructure around its ability to provide interpretation and translation was pretty low. They didn't have many in-person interpreters. They were often using monitors where you could call into phone numbers and then the translation was happening that way. And then trauma-informed care was a whole nother space that really came up about all the different things people were experiencing for how the hospital treated them and what was happening to their experience during their hospital stay, no matter where they were on their journey. And we really tried to track from the moment you entered the emergency room why you were in the emergency room, and up. So we were collecting stories that we followed a particular pattern and process. The other space for us was around how did this hospital's experience impact the community? What were they doing? What was their relationship to the community? So if you all know anything about Rhode Island, Providence specifically, the place where our hospitals are, they tore down a core part of the South Providence community, which is a predominantly Black community. And there was a whole part of our data that really people kept talking about what used to be and before they did this. So they tore down homes where there are now parking lots. And you have a children's hospital, the women's hospital, and Rhode Island Hospital. So you have 3 different hospitals in the corner of the South Providence community. And that understanding place in the context of your research and the impact, we weren't expecting to go to that direction, but it was something that kept coming up in the story in our process of the storytelling. So as a result of understanding what our key learnings, we developed a campaign that had 4 categories. One was about passing a doula reimbursement act in partnership with the doula task force. So Sista Fire helped start a doula task force, and we had a set of Black doulas that were part of Sista Fire who were really leading the charge of helping Rhode Island understand the role of doulas in this work. And through our research and through our community engagement process, we did presentations around what the importance of doulas are. We brought in folks to help do doula trainings. The result of that was we helped to co-create a Doulas of Color network. Our work really started to inform the strategy on how the Department of Health really started to move, because they were the other place. Rhode Island is pretty small. We don't have a public health and Department of Health. It's all one for us. But it was also the way in which in our data we learned the impact of toxic stress on people of color, on women of color in our communities, and that there needed to be ways in which folks address these things. Our biggest part of our campaign was about changing hospital policies and their practices at women and infants. And our community demands, for us, we really try to move into a space of action that looked at how do we take all of this data, take this learning, and move into action with it. As we talked about before, it's like, how does community participatory action research help build power? How does it help us move towards the responses that we want? So in our process of moving to action, beyond just doing research, we took our research, we held an accountability session with Women and Infants Hospital, where we put all the data up, right? And we had parents and mamas come and tell their stories. And we had people look at their data about what was happening. That was the hospital's first time ever coming into a community and actually listening to a community. They were very shocked. They did a lot of stuttering. This picture you see, the pictures you see on the side are pictures from that moment where people were standing pretty fiercely about the challenges that they were experiencing. We challenged women and infants that we had our demands, but the reality is they needed their own action plan. How are you going to respond to what we've put out, what we have said to you? They told us they had never seen this much data or type of data about their hospital. For us, that was very surprising. It said something about how they do their own work. We also had to figure out in that overall plan is how do we move through the plan? How do we continue to monitor and check in? We were in a pandemic at the time, and so how we move into action really had implications on what we were able to do with the hospital. So we had to have a number of things online. Our second accountability session, because we felt like they were moving way too slow, was really about, we had about, I think 100 or about 150 folks online during the accountability session, walking through all the things that they said they were going to do, but yet hadn't done. And we were monitoring back and forth. And from that point, we really began to lay out our own demands, because we were like, you said you were going to do these things, but here are our demands about what we think you should be doing at this point. Our demands that came out of our data, so I talked about the 4 areas, but those 4 areas, we started really breaking them down. We spent almost a year reviewing the data, going back and really what is the best type of things that need to happen as it relates to people of color. We brought folks in to really talk to our members in the community about what are some responses, along with us developing our own. So the key things that we really had to address was the culture and approach to the hospital itself, that there are issues around race. There's what was clear to us was the structural racism that was deeply embedded inside of the hospital, and based on the way in which people felt like they were treated, even when they were in hospitals, right? In the hospital. I talked some about the translation interpretation. One of the other large things was the workforce. The majority of the people in the hospital are white. And so our big push was, how do you shift who your workforce is? We've gotten them to increase and change the percentages that they're willing to hire. And so they haven't increased the number of nurses of color, because those are the most public facing when it comes to patients. They've also hired more folks of color at the leadership level. One of the challenges, though, was their ability to sustain and keep people. And so between the union and the hospital, we were able to get them to commit to developing a program that supported people through their first year of the process. The other pieces for us was around doula engagement, making sure that they have a strong policy around doulas being in the hospital, because what we know is that families are birthing at hospitals with doulas increase the success of delivery and the parent coming through by almost 30% when they have a doula in relationship with them. We set up and developed an independent reviewer committee that was beyond Sista Fire, that has done checking in about, are they keeping up to their agreements? We also have been challenging them around the community resource space, because they had a pretty dormant space, and we're like, if you're supposed to be a resource to people, what are you doing? So that is a much more lively place. It has more volunteers and active people in it. they go out into the community even more in terms of building relationships. Right now, where our campaign is that we're monitoring. We've already passed the doula bill. We've really deepened the investment of the Department of Health within communities of color when it comes to Black maternal health. Sista Fire was core in pushing and challenging them around the, right now there is a maternal child task force that has the state has a strategic plan, and there's a particular plan that Sista Fire's data completely informed. We really challenged them to think, what are the impacts prior to people even giving birth that has impact on their lives? So we've been able to use our data beyond just our hospitals and a policy, but also pushing the state to really think about where their investments are going and resources are going. Our Doulas of Color network is active and growing, so we're excited about that. I am trying to move fast because I want to have a lot of more time for conversations, and so I'm gonna end that piece and just say the thing for me when we think about this, I'm gonna put a question to you all and then have you all bring questions to me, is when you think about knowledge, where does knowledge come from? Right? Where does knowledge come from? Y'all can't sit quiet and do that to me. Just come on. Y'all are too brilliant. Y'all don't do all you do in the world and don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I'll just say, I think from your own experience and hearing the experience of other people is where I think you get most of your knowledge, your real knowledge.
Yep, from the people. That's a part of it, our lived experience, what we know. What else? Where else do we get knowledge from? Thank you, Susan. Co-creation, all right. Alexis, all I know you. All right, knowledge, co-creation of it. Where else? Text, shared data, observation. I gotta get in the chat, sorry. Woo, y'all be moving. Listening to elders, exactly. Shared data, yep. What else? Anybody in the room want to add something? All right. So, Ray, is somebody coming? I saw your hand go up.
Just say like trial and error, but
that's experience. Very good. Practice. Yep. What else?
I'll put mine in the chat, but sometimes it's just embodied. Like our bodies remember.
Yep.
Our bodies are.
Yep. Very good. Knowledge comes from interaction with text, people, organisms, intimate objects. Knowledge comes from learning. Yes. Right. The thing that why I asked that question is because knowledge can come from multiple places, from lived experience, observation, and practice, community relationships. It also comes from formal systems, right? And what we know is that most formal systems is what people believe in. So academia, from whatever level it wants to come, there's a whole ton of knowledge that comes from there. There's also the church, faith spaces, right? There's this whole set of knowledge that come from faith spaces that intertwine into our lives. Media, not just social media, all kind of media impacts the knowledge that we have. The challenge for us when we're organizing is that our knowledge has to come from the people who are in that experience. But we also want to organize our knowledge in a way that tells our stories from our perspectives, right? And be thoughtful about it. We, in really training and developing our members to really be the deliverers of that information. I often laugh that I'm the person that ends up doing presentations at times because a lot of our members right now are in committee meetings like you all. But for us, it was like, how do we train folks to develop surveys, go out and apply the surveys in our community, come back and collect the data, analyze the data, and then put it back out to our community in multiple ways. Then how do we take that and do another layer of research? Because we wanted people to understand that they have what it takes. They are the information people. In the beginning, that was a real shift for our folks because they kept wanting to go to academia. Well, this report says this. I don't care what that report says. They ain't the women. They are not the parents that just lost children. You know, I don't care. That used to be my thing. Stop telling me that. Don't come in here with another report that you think we're going to use. No. I want to know, go home and ask your mama what her birthing was like. Go home and ask this, that. How do we start to own our own lived experience? And watching people go and learn the histories or stories of their ancestors and their practices of how we birthed before the medical industrial complex. All of those things played into our process of really telling story and collecting. So I will end with that right there. This is the shortest process that I've ever done. So, but I am open for questions. I can keep talking, but I would love to somebody to ask me a question. You can ask about the campaign. You can ask about our process.
I have a question. Did you find it difficult in the beginning to get people to tell you their stories, or was that pretty easy to do?
It wasn't, we had a, how did we do that? We started with our own inner circle. So we really started with our own members. And then we held a community gathering that we were introducing people to reproductive justice as a framework. And there was a part of that that we asked people if they would share their stories with us. But we did a number of different things within the space before we got to the storytelling. But we were door knocking, outreaching, and canvassing everywhere we thought women would be. We went to laundromats, we went to hair salons, nail salons, just talking to people about the fact that we were collecting birth stories and if they would be interested, if they were willing to tell. Some people told right in the moment. And so that was really part of what we called field notes and our observation notes. And then we had been collecting and just building from person to person over a period of time. And it also was like, we shared some things on social media. We didn't get a lot off of, like, we would put out and say, you could write your own story here. We didn't get a lot from that, but we got so much more just going in the community and talking to folks wherever we were, wherever we felt like there was someone who would be willing. And that's really for us how we also built our base. that's how we really deepened our relationships with folks in our community, because we kind of started to become, oh, those are the folks that are collecting stories. Because we had only been, I think we were in year 2 of Sista Fire. So people didn't fully know us as of yet. Yeah, great question. Other folks?
I do have a question. Thank you for sharing. Hi, I'm Naisha, y'all, by the way, and I would have she, her pronouns. I am very interested in understanding how you all identify the problems and how long that took, right? Because there's, in my own perspective, I say, I believe in divine timing, and this was that because I'm trying to tackle the benefits cliff the exact same way that you're doing that. I feel like they're not using the stories. They're not using the stories to talk about the disparities that the welfare system causes. They're just not doing it. So
yeah,
that's exactly what. But I was trying to figure out, you could collect the stories, and then how, that switch.
Yeah. So we did story collection, and I can talk about what we did with the stories. We had very specific stories about people. We would ask them, what part of your story do you want to share with us? They would determine that, because we created we categorized from where people, like, what was pre-birth, birth, after you gave birth, on your way home. Like, we had multiple times we just started seeing categories. We look for patterns. What are common threads that were running through? So there was all these things that people talked about, what they experienced around translation and the lack of translation, or translation interpretation. When they went in, they didn't even ask me what language I spoke. So they were these pieces of stories, and we would start categorizing those things together to see what it told us. And, we were blessed that our other co-founder, Chinrabi, and one of our younger members had some coding experience, but we used a lot. We used Survey Monkey for some things, for our survey stuff. We organized things by themes. We paid a little bit of money for some program online, and people started doing so. We had no money back then, so everything was beg, borrow, and steal, whatever we could. But it was really tracking the patterns that we started to see. And then we had someone who interned for me when I worked for a national organization. I ran into her, and she was now pre-med. I was like, girl, wait. And she came, and she had just helped us understand what we were finding. Then the doulas played a critical role, because the doulas will say, oh, what they're talking about right here is when you're in the hospital, this is what happens. And so we just started tracking themes. SurveyMonkey does a level of reorganizing your data for you. And so we used the themes, we put them up, and we extracted quotes. Quotes are very powerful. We took quotes that were very explicit about what people were experiencing, and we organized quotes based on the themes that we had. And then it took us a year to really go through all of our data and really start to organize it, but to say, what do we want done about that? What does that mean? And so we would then sometimes we were coming up with the solution. We called them our own community solutions. And I will be honest, I was teaching as I was going, and this was a whole new body of work for most of us. We had never done it. I had done community participatory action research before, but not to this depth. So a lot of it was calling people we know, yo, what do you think? Who should I talk to? And at that time, you just started trying to talk to as many people as you can to back up and support what you're doing. I hope that's helpful. And you can also call me to say, how can I do it? How is the activity of the mutual aid? Hang on, sorry. I can't see that full question. How is the activity of the mutual aid branch of Sista Fire sustained? Meeting frequent, okay. So mutual aid has changed its identity multiple times at Sista Fire. When we first started, it was clothing exchange. Members would bring in stuff and they would exchange their things. When the pandemic hit was when, well, even prior to the pandemic, when Sista Fire first started, we didn't always have enough money. I did a lot of freelancing on the side to help us have money to do certain things. And my freelancing money at first was what paid for people to be able to cover their rent. We didn't tell people that, but it was our hustle. Like, oh, you want to learn how to do this? So we would, myself and the co-director, do different things to raise money. During the pandemic, people were giving a lot and we started pooling money that way. Our members do a lot of individual fundraising to help sustain that, but we had money coming in from different places. So we were doing money towards evictions. Before we had the Doula and Reinvestment Act passed, we were covering some costs for doulas to make sure mamas had doulas coverage, food stuff. And it was a lot of online fundraising our members were doing. We had a couple of rapid response grants from foundations, but it was mainly individual donors. We tried to completely end mutual aid 3 years ago. 2 years ago, Justice? I don't remember. 2 years ago. We looked at all of our work. We looked at what families came to us multiple times, and we organized our resources to support, I think there was about 10 families with larger donations because we were saying we're closing out. And we did that, and then other folks we gave gift cards to. I got a request 2 days ago for rent. It's never stopped. The requests have never, ever stopped. Especially with the impact around the ICE raids and stuff, people's families being split up, we had to give money to families to try to figure out how to support. And then our members went and did a pretty large fundraiser. I think they used my birthday and something else as part of that. And they raised a set of money. So we've used some of that to help cover. Right now, we're at the place, it's just not sustainable. We've sustained as long as we could. And we're clear now that we have to do something different. And we're in the process now. Our mutual aid team is working to figure out what's a different kind of strategy that we can use to support folks. So we are looking at smaller potential things around solidarity economy work, things that we can do, whether it's like susus. We brought folks to Black Possibilities because we were like, we need to go hear from people who do this stuff already. We're clear that it's not sustainable, right? We've been building with Ujima for over a year now, just trying to deepen our relationships with you all because you understand this work in a way that we just don't. And we've been trying to pay attention and look at what other folks are doing because we're clear once this current bill hits, our folks are going to be, we're going to be right back where we were before. And what we have a strong infrastructure to respond to certain things, but not all things. That's Justice and I were just meeting with a small part of our team yesterday to rethink how we're going to be responding. So we don't have an answer for long-term sustainability. We're hoping maybe y'all have some thoughts for us. You know, we're just trying to figure it out as we go also. And we're a pretty small team, and that's part of our challenge too. Yeah.
And to add to that, Ditra, I think part of the reason our organizing focus tends to be on transforming these root causes and change and like shifting what our systems look like to be more communal, more ingrained in our cultural practices is because the current system will never stop seeing this need. Like this is foundational to how the current system works, which is why mutual aid has taken the place of social services that they keep gutting, right? And it's why the focus on organizing and why the focus on transformation is so critical as we continue to base build, both in Rhode Island, as y'all continue to base build in Boston, as we continue to build connections locally, regionally, and globally.
We have a community baby shower that one of our members asked us to start. We do it every other year. We don't do it every year. So it's happening this year. This is our third time. And it's been critical. And we didn't even understand how critical it was until the stories that we started collecting during that time. We also have been working on baby bonds and, you know, trying to talk to folks about potential cash assistance stuff. So trying to find some other types of solutions here and there. The community baby shower, we collect donations, but we also set aside money to purchase things. We have what's called a freedom boutique within the baby shower, which is all secondhand stuff that we give away. We have raffles. So we try to make sure everybody leaves with something during that time. We're going to be collecting stories during the community baby shower to help towards our fight for these cash assistance and baby bonds work. We also have done tons of other participatory action research stuff. This summer, we collected stories around rent stabilization was the other thing, because we're working on some campaign stuff around our local city council, DARE, who we're in coalition with. It's their campaign, and we'll be, as part of our work within the campaign, was collecting stories for women and non-binary folks to talk about the impact of rent on folks.
Just wanted to say thank you so much, and I will be happy to pass to the next person. I put in the chat an example of something we're trying to breathe life into again. Also, you know, emerging from the initial part of the pandemic, it's the Ujima Cousins Time Bank, an exchange of labor via time. People. You mentioned Providence and Boston activity and membership, so I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. It's not gone. It hasn't gone away. It just needs a breath of fresh air into it again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Back to Ray.
We'll definitely follow up. I remember time banking years ago when I was in DC. In Baltimore did it. Baltimore had a strong time banking strategy there. I might be dating myself for some of you if I keep talking, but I like time banking. All right.
We have one more
hit it on the nail.
We have one more question in person.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. I was really curious about the accountability session that you had with the hospital. And I was thinking a few things. One is like, how did you bring trauma-informed care into that space to make it feel safe enough for people to share their stories? Like, that's such a courageous thing to do in a space like that. And then secondly, it sounds like the hospital was pretty receptive or open to what you were saying. And I'm thinking about how like in spaces that you're trying to bring accountability to, defensiveness is so often the posture. And so I'm just curious like what strategies you use to like kind of bring down that defensiveness.
One of the first thoughts I had was, make sure Ditra gets her shit out before she comes in the room. I got to get all my yelling out. But first thing was preparation is everything, right? We had people waiting who wanted to still tell their stories because they thought they were alone. And so those are some of the most powerful stories that end up being told, right? And we work with people to prepare their story. So they're not reliving the story. They're talking about key points from their heart, like what part is their heart part and what part is a little factual, so they can feel a little bit removed from it. And we do preparation for that. The other thing is about what we do in our space. Like you all, we have an opening, we have a grounding. Our folks help prepare the space. They define what the space is going to be like. Our first accountability session, we had dinner, right, together. We broke bread because we were like, they're coming into our space. We're not going to their space. They're going to do what we do. And we really try to hold our culture and our practice for how we were guided through that. So we had one that was in person, and the second one was on Zoom, which was a little more challenging with my members because they were clicking in because the level of anger had rose for them because the hospital hadn't followed through on a set of things. And so I was hustling, trying to mute people. Like, okay, y'all, wait, like not all at once. I was like, oh my goodness. But for us, in that, we always started, when it was online, we started with the stories first. First and foremost, it was about the stories. Nobody else gets to talk. And to the people who had decided that night that they would share their stories, we play music, we open a space, and they could bow out at any moment. We had their stories prepared on paper. They also had the option of their stories being recorded, so they didn't do it in front of people in actuality. So we tried to provide options for how and when people told their stories. Like I said, the Zoom stuff was harder. The hospital themselves they're so rigid and corporate, they don't know how to adjust to a moment. And they thought anything that they had to say, we were going to just be happy about. And our members were like, yeah, that shit doesn't fall for us. Because you said, and we are preparers. Because we were like, we tricked them into sending their stuff to us beforehand. We read through it and did a comparison against what they were supposed to have done and what they actually did. And so people were ready and they had their responses. The energy of how the response came out on Zoom was hard at moments. Then the hospital was pissed off because they were like, you've recorded us. I was like, you ain't never said we couldn't record you. I didn't need to ask you permission. This is our Zoom. What?
Rhode Island is a one-party recording.
We know the law. There we go. And so that stuff for us, it pushed the envelope, but for them, it pushed the envelope. It didn't, but we didn't have ways to do real direct action. And so for us, I felt like I had to let the energy rise and for them to understand how serious people were. But we always keep the focus on our membership and the folks who were telling a story. Yeah, I don't know what other way to say that. I was having flashbacks. But I feel like that last accountability session was where the biggest ahas happened for the hospital, and they made a pivot. So. Is there somewhere we can read any stories? Is there any place you can read stories? We didn't publish people's stories. All we did was publish the findings and the learnings from the stories. We've been working on kind of a report of our experience, but that in itself, it just feels like it's taken on different iterations because of time. But we've never really published the stories publicly like that. I think it might have been a commitment we made. It's been some time because people had to they made a series of decisions around what we could do with their stories. So that might have been why we didn't publish, but we've published was the findings. So we collectivize the themes and the data, and that's what we shared. And we shared quotes though, but we didn't share the stories. What were some of the ways you shared back the data for your members? We had multiple ways. So we've done a couple of big community sessions for people who were not regular members. But we shared our regular data. Our members were the ones that were reviewing it, wasn't staff. I didn't review the data, and I taught people how to look for themes, how do we organize information, but they did that work. Some of the moms were incredibly active in that, and then some in the doulas were also. So we shared everything multiple times throughout the year because it was the way in which we were able to put the findings and the learning together, was based on the analysis that members came up with and the solutions that they came up with. I say that to folks all the time. I facilitated us through the process, but I wasn't in the process because I wasn't a person birthing.